So lots going on in the tax world, and the wealth tax has reared its ugly head again, this time in California, where it's probably legal, which is a question we will address, as opposed to in the from the federal standpoint, where it's, in my opinion, clearly illegal. How is that going to affect anybody who's not technically subject to it? It's a billionaire's tax, so it's supposed to only if you have $1 billion of net worth, and it's supposed to be a one-time tax. So there's all these promises in this proposal that is being launched in California. They're trying to get it on the ballot, and interestingly enough, we have a governor who's opposing it, pretty strongly opposing it. Good for him. But it's already having consequences. So today we have really an expert in this area, Jon Coupal from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. For those of you who don't know who Howard Jarvis was, I'll let Jon explain that, because he's a very important person in the history of fighting unruly taxes. So today we're going to discover first, what is it? What is a wealth tax? How likely is it to pass? But also, what's the consequence for everybody else, and not just Californians, but people outside of California? What happens if California actually enacts this tax, which is supposedly this small tax on a very few people? But what are the unintended consequences of this tax? What do we think is going to happen? So, Jon, thank you so much for joining us on the Wealthability Show. And
Pleasure.
if you would give us a little bit, first of all, a little bit of Howard Jarvis and background, and your background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association was formed, obviously, by Howard Jarvis. He was the principal drafter and sponsor of Proposition 13 in 1978. For people who have some familiarity with California, property taxes were out of control in the 70s, driven a lot by just the increasing value in property. So under a traditional property tax system, your property taxes are based both on the rate and the value of your property. And the average property tax rate in California at about 1978 was about 2.6%, which is pretty high. But what was really driving the tax crisis was the increasing values. People were getting assessed values from their county assessor 3 times, 5 times, 10 times their previous value. So people were literally being taxed out of their homes. Howard Jarvis tried several times to qualify an initiative to limit property taxes. And then in 1978, it was a confluence of events. The tax bills had just gone out. People were really up in arms. What's really interesting, Tom, about the Prop 13 battle is that just about every interest groups, including businesses, quite frankly, businesses, education, labor, all the editorial boards were against Proposition 13, and yet it passed by 66%. So this was an example of the political elites being pretty much out of touch with where voters were. And we've seen this before. We saw this with the Tea Party movement. And I think also the election of Donald Trump is a little bit of this populist movement going up. So we here at Howard Jarvis, we're California's largest taxpayer advocacy organization. We have 200,000 members. Our dues are very modest. We ask people to chip in $15 a year. But our primary responsibility is to defend Proposition 13 and to defend homeowners in the state of California. We do get business support. Businesses like to support our foundation, and we have owners of small number apartment units, 4 units, 6 units, big supporters of ours, obviously because property taxes are a big element of the apartment industry. And then for my background, I went to law school at the College of William and Mary, came to California in 1982, and worked for a very good conservative public interest law firm called the Pacific Legal Foundation. Did that for 10 years, and then went to work as the litigator for the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, and then became president in 2000. So I've been at this fight for a long time. The Jarvis Association, we do a lot of litigation. We have a full-time lobbyist. We do a lot of public education, and we're involved in just about every initiative battle that's coming down the pike. Most of it in defense of Prop 13, but we're taking a special interest in the wealth tax as well, because as you indicated, there's a lot of unintended consequences.
Well, and the issue with the wealth tax is it is a property tax. I mean, that is why it's illegal federally, because property tax is illegal federally. It has to be duly apportioned. Any tax federally has to be duly apportioned among the states, which property tax is not. So wealth tax is really not something, it's been proposed federally, but the chances of it getting upheld federally is unlikely. But states can have property taxes. So this is, if you would, first of all, walk through what this billionaire tax is. What's the proposal according to their documentation?
Sure. Number one, it's very convoluted, and I agree with you that a wealth tax at the federal level is illegal, unconstitutional. But I would argue that this proposal is unconstitutional as well under the federal Constitution. Many bases, deprivation of equal protection, due process, interference with the constitutional right to travel. They have a reach back provision. They try to retroactively apply this to people who have already moved out of the state. And so there's a number of legal problems they have. And that's just, Tom, that's just the beginning. There are implementation problems.
Well, we'll get to all that, but what is this tax? I mean, so
yeah,
people don't know.
Yeah, the tax is an attempt to take California's richest individuals, I think of like the top 30 individuals, and impose a supposedly one-time 5% tax on their entire wealth. Now, a lot of questions derive from this. What is wealth? How do you value certain assets? What happens when somebody moves out? What if somebody is a founder of a high-tech firm? How do you value their stock options? There are so many unanswered questions, and it's extremely complicated. We can get into that if you want, but quite frankly, I think at this point, a poll just came out that was taken in the last several days, and the polling is very, very weak on this. I think it's below 50%, and that's not where you want to start if you're trying to get an initiative passed by the voters. And as you indicated at the top of the show, Tom, Governor Newsom has come out against this. Very rarely does the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association find itself on the same side as Governor Newsom. But and it's not just him. It seems like many of the more moderate leaders, believe it or not, there are some moderate Democrats in California, have indicated concerns or outright opposition with this. So, but the
I'm curious. Who's behind this?
Oh, it's what we refer to as the usual suspects, which is the public sector labor organizations, specifically SEIU, and the healthcare workers. So what they're trying to do is trying to make up a lot of money that they claim was taken away from them by the Trump administration's new rules saying that undocumented individuals should not be receiving federal funds, and which most states agree with that. California, being California, are still trying to play fast and loose with Medicaid, or what we call in California Medi-Cal, same thing. So they're behind it. They are well financed, but I'll have to say, when it comes to this specific initiative, they've got some problems. Number one, we're trying to qualify our own initiative, and we started several months ago. They just hit the street in terms of petitions within the last 2 weeks. Let's assume for the moment it will qualify. I think the voters are going to be very suspect, but if it does pass, I think the thing will be tied up in court. But as you indicated, the consequences of just proposing this, just merely proposing it, has a chilling effect on
Well,
capital.
let's talk about that, because what you're doing is you're getting capital flee the state. Now, yeah, of course, this is a this is something that people try to do all the time. We'll tax everybody else. The voters aren't going to be the ones being taxed. So let's have other people pay for our taxes, not us. Which, as you and I know, that's a falsehood. But
Sure.
but on the surface, that's what's going on. You're talking about 30 people paying this tax. It's 5%.
Right.
5% of $1 billion is a lot of money, but what's left over is a lot of money too. So people go, well, so what? If you have $950 million instead of $1 billion, so what? It's not going to change your lifestyle. It's not going to change what you do. Why not? Why not do this? And so I'm going to ask you that question. What is wrong with it? Why not do it? I mean, if it were just that, if it were truly a one-time tax on billionaires, do you think
Right.
anybody would actually oppose that other than the 30 billionaires? And some of them have come out in favor of it.
Yeah, one or two, not many, but yes, I think it's the reason I think it would be rejected is for the same reason that voters rejected the split roll tax initiative back in 2015. The split roll was in 2015. It was 4 election cycles ago. Split roll was an attempt that comes up periodically to split off commercial property from residential property and being able to tax commercial property at a higher rate. And the usual suspects again.
Which we actually have in Arizona. So commercial property is taxed at a higher rate.
Yeah, in California, the unified tax rate has been part of our Constitution since the mid 1800s. We've always had a unified property tax rate. So every now and then there's a proposal to stick it to business. But voters, by the way, voters in California are far more centrist than they are progressive, contrary to what a lot of people in the rest of the nation think. They've rejected split roll. Recently, they rejected an effort last election cycle. They rejected an effort to lower the vote threshold for local bonds. They did support an initiative for stricter criminal control, public safety. So again, and they rejected an effort to expand rent control. So voters, I think, are sophisticated, and I think the message against this billionaires tax is very simple. The billionaires are kind of the engine that's driving California in terms of its innovation, capital formation, and they have other places to go. I mean, there have been stories after stories of the list of businesses that have moved out of the state of California, and people are beginning to understand that. And I think that is a big problem for the people who are trying to stick it to the billionaires. I mean, one thing that we always say is nobody was ever hired by a poor person. And so it's the people with means who hire people. And California has a lot of negative metrics. We have the highest poverty rate in the nation when cost of living is taken into effect, high housing costs, some of the highest taxes in the nation. So I think people are, we're beginning to sense a groundswell of opposition against some of this more.
I can tell you from that. I know I've had clients that moved out of California, and they moved out because of taxes. And Texas has taken a lot of them. Florida takes some. Arizona's taken an enormous number.
Right.
And this is going back several years. I remember the first time I went to a Phoenix Suns game, and that was Phoenix Suns versus the LA Lakers, and there were more LA Lakers fans than Phoenix Suns fans. And that was shocking to me. But that is simply, it's less expensive here. My wife and I like to say that California has a beach tax and Arizona has a desert discount. Our taxes cap at 2.5%, so that's it. And so people can move with their feet, and some billionaires have already moved, right? As I understand it.
Oh, quite a few.
You've had a few that have already made this move because this was supposed to be retroactive to January 1st.
Yeah, I think that provision alone has some constitutional infirmities, because I think without notice, an attempt to tax wealth of somebody who has already prior to the effective date of the proposal has already moved out, I would like that constitutional challenge. I think that they have some difficulties. And again, and it's not a minor point, but the California Tax Administration Agency has made it clear that they do not have the bandwidth, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the ability to try to calculate wealth. They can calculate income, but they can't to try to say, okay, how much is this painting worth? Well, if it's Hunter Biden and you're told it's $10 billion piece of artwork, you know, who's going to be the call balls and strikes on that one? So a lot of problems, but we will fight it. We take all these things seriously.
I get that. So let's talk about the what I call the slippery slope here, which is because it's not just California. We're seeing this in New York. We're seeing this in Washington State, where we're seeing other. There are pockets of this country that are. I mean, it goes back to AOC wanting to tax the rich, right? And so there is some movement in some parts of the country there. And when you say, well, we're going to just tax the super rich, one of the challenges, of course, is, does it stop there? Is it a one-time tax? First of all, does anybody believe this is going to be a one-time tax?
No.
And no. Does anybody believe it's going to stop with billionaires?
No. I mean, I think again, people have seen the consequences of an anti-business environment, and it's not just the taxes, Tom.
And has government ever seen a dollar they didn't want to spend?
Yeah, exactly. Again, highest income tax in state income tax in America, 13.3%. Highest state sales tax rate, 7.25%. Highest gas tax, corporate taxes, business taxes at regular income. You know, it is very hostile here. And are we prepared for a sea change? I don't know. But here's the consequence demographically. And that is, for all this talk about gerrymandering and redistricting and everybody carving up their own state to benefit one party or the other, the reality is California cannot ignore what's going to happen in 2030. Because after the 2030 census, California will lose probably at least 5 representatives in Congress. 2 of them will go to Texas, 2 of them will go to Florida. The others will go who knows where, Ohio, Carolinas, who knows. But the hostile tax environment in California is going to result in less political influence in Washington, D.C. And that's, to my way of thinking, a good thing. The other point is, there's been this belief that these people who move out of California are taking liberal, progressive views with them. And I think there's not a lot of data on this, but the little data I've seen is that at least in Texas, the Californians who have moved to Texas tend to vote a little bit more conservative than even Texans themselves, which tells you that they are aware of what drove them out of the state of California.
Although I would challenge that a little bit, because Arizona's become a purple state since California moved here. So we were always a red state until California started the great California migration east into Arizona. So there is definitely some of that for sure. Let's talk about some of the problems with a wealth tax, if we can, because you alluded to it. Who's going to value the art? Who's going to value the administration on this? Seems to me, I mean, you think about how difficult the income tax is to administer. We have franchise tax board, right? In California, we have the Internal Revenue Service. Every state has its own whole department of revenue. And you have all of those people, and these are laws that have evolved over a number of years. Right. Okay. And now you put a whole new system in place. Who's going to do all those valuations? Is that going to be the government that's going to value it? And how are they going to find the people? How much is it going to cost them just to do those valuations? Those, of course, valuations are subjective to a large extent, especially when you're talking about art or businesses
Right.
or things like that. They're so subjective. It's one thing if you're talking about marketable securities, that are public securities on the stock market, or you're talking
Right.
about gold and silver, which have, spot price, a market price. But when you get into private businesses, land, you get into art, collectibles, all those other things there. All the values are in the mind's eye of the beholder, right? So how are they proposing? I'm curious, how are they proposing managing this?
Well, I think one of the things that frightens people the most is that not just for these billionaires, but I believe a requirement of all taxpayers will be to assign some form of affirmation that they're not a billionaire. And I don't know how long those forms are. I don't think that that's been worked out. But I think part of this is just trying to get more information from all taxpayers, not just billionaires, kind of laying
Mm,
the ground, groundwork
interesting.
for the expansion of this tax. And when you raise the boogeyman of loss of privacy in California, I don't care whether you're liberal or conservative, but this is a very this state. The citizens of this state value their privacy a lot. It's kind of like the per vehicle mile traveled tax. Are you going to put a GPS in everybody's car? I think some people are like, no, just privacy concerns alone.
I'm actually, I'm just going to interrupt you here. Uh, that's already there. Years ago, I went to register my 2006 car do my annual emissions test. I
Right.
failed. The reason I failed is because the computer in my car wasn't set up so they could track me. That was in Arizona. So
Wow.
if you think there's privacy, think again. There is no,
Yeah.
the government knows where you are. You have a cell phone. They know where you are all the time. Let's talk about the billionaires moving out and the people moving out, because there has been very well documented migration out of California, in large part because of the tax and spend philosophy of the California legislature. What what do you see as the impact on California and the California economy of that migration?
It's all negative. It's all negative. As productive businesses move out, somebody has to fill the gap. Now in California, we our income tax structure is so progressive, um, and yet we generate more money than ever, mostly because of stock options and capital gains. But as we have seen during a recession, that money shuts off like a spigot. And so California is struggling even in a robust economy. Heaven forbid we hit another recession like 2008 or the dot-com bust, because that was extremely painful. Other states have been far more wise in planning for downturns in the economy. California, not so much. But I think the consequences are severe. I know that the governor claims to be wanting to buttress the rainy day fund, but the demand for more money from all the special interests is very, very strong. And California, its budget increases significantly more than population and inflation every year. The only growth industry in California right now is no longer Hollywood or high tech, it's government. And that, I think, is a recipe for disaster. So we're watching it, we're fighting it. As it relates to this particular tax, if I had a gun to the head response, what are the chances? I don't think it's going to make it. But we have, to your point about valuing these assets, we all know that a property tax is a wealth tax,
Yep.
but the way California taxes property by using acquisition value and then a 2% inflation factor actually provides a great deal of stability and predictability. And then when property changes hands, it's reassessed to full market value, kind of mark to market, as you would. it's turned out to be, of all the revenue streams in California, it's been the most predictable, stable, and it's actually been a benefit to local governments because it's been a shock absorber against recessions. So I've always argued to the elected leadership that if you want a better tax system, look at Prop 13 because it generates property tax revenues in excess of population and inflation, provides money for local government, and yet is far more stable than the sales tax or income tax.
Interesting, interesting, and because certainly because of Prop 13, because it's acquisition, it tends to not be as regressive as other taxes. Sales tax being very can be very regressive without proper exemptions. Income tax, of course, is progressive, not regressive.
Right.
So that's a whole different animal. Let's wrap up with this. Let's talk about what happens in California tends to bleed across the rest of the country. What do you think the impact of these repeated proposals? So it started with frankly, the 2016 election, right, where you had Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, 2016, and 2020, both proposing wealth taxes across the country. You have a socialist as mayor of New York City. You have clearly the progressives have completely taken over both Oregon and Washington. We knew California. We jokingly called California the People's Republic of California, but
Yes.
but Washington and Portland are not behind in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
How do you think that these proposals, do you see them leaking and actually causing, is there any kind of momentum for these, or do you think there's just, these are just fringe operators?
Well, maybe a little bit of both. I think they are outliers. I'm not sure they're fringe because certainly in New York City, it's certainly not fringe because Mandami was elected. So,
Right.
But I think it's going to be a interesting experiment. I mean, we live in a federal system where each state is a experiment. We got 50 experiments going on in America right now, and people can judge for themselves who succeeds and who fails. And I think one of the reasons Gavin Newsom opposes this is I think he clearly has his eyes on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and he knows that supporting a wealth tax would be very detrimental to his run. I think I'm not going to predict who's going to be nominated, but I do believe going forward, if you see this continuing dichotomy of citizens of America self-selecting, moving to places where their political alignment is more, where they go, where people agree with them. And there was just another study on that there are more progressives coming to California and more conservatives moving out of California. So this is a self-selection process. And I think we're going to be able to do side-by-side comparisons as this trend continues. And I'm comfortable enough in believing in free markets and limited government that I think our side is going to compare very favorably to those jurisdictions that pursue a mindless pursuit of collectivism. So we'll see how it goes. I think you're right. It can bleed out, particularly to major metropolitan areas. To me, Tom, quite frankly, the real issue is education. I think we're not educating our young people to understand economics, finance, and along those lines, when I see the school choice movement taking off, that has significant positive downstream effects.
Right.
Arizona actually has as a model of school choice, and I think you guys are going to benefit from that tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. I think the charter school experiment here has been extraordinarily successful on the school choice. So thank you, Jon, so much for joining us on the Wealthability Show. Any final words of wisdom or recommendations for people outside of, maybe you want to stay out of California if you don't want to pay high taxes, but anything people can do?
Yeah, I think for your California residents, we're currently trying to qualify an initiative to plug some of the major loopholes in Prop 13. People can actually download a petition by going to saveprop13.com, saveprop13.com, download the petition. We're almost qualified, but we need to get over the finish line. And again, for people who don't know about it, go to that website and learn about it. But it is critically important that we try to save the last vestige of freedom in California by protecting Prop 13.
Awesome. And where can we find people find more information about the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association?
Yeah, very simply, it's at hjta.org, hjta.org.
Well, thank you much, Jon Coupal from Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, for joining us today on the Wealthability Show. This may seem like a California issue, but I guarantee this is not a California alone issue. This is an issue. These things do bleed, and they bleed across state boundaries. We've seen it in Arizona as people come here. Certainly, they've seen it in Oregon and Washington. It's bled north. Certainly, we're going to continue to see this effect, and it affects everybody. It affects all business owners. It affects every investor. It affects every person. And if we don't understand it, and we don't understand what we can do to fight it, we can certainly vote with our feet. We've seen billionaires in California already vote with their feet, and a lot of our clients actually have moved out of California voting with their feet. You can vote with your feet, you can vote with your dollar, and you can vote by liking shows like the Wealthability Show and promoting them to your friends and family so that everybody can get, as you say, Jon, well more educated. When you get more educated, you're always going to make way more money and pay way less tax. We'll see you next time on the Wealthability Show.
Take care. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthability Show. If today's episode gave you a new perspective, remember this: the tax law is not your enemy. It's a roadmap. And when you know how to follow it, you can build real, lasting wealth. If you're a business owner or investor who's tired of overpaying taxes, the Wealthability Accelerator is your next step. You'll have the opportunity to work directly with me for 80% less than my standard rate. And I'll personally guide you through how to change your facts so that you can change your tax. Go to wealthability.com/bonus and apply today. Remember, it's not just what you make, it's what you keep.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.